So today's video is going to be all about my love for One Piece. If you don't know, I recently caught up with the series. I've dedicated the last year of my life to being very invested in this story, and I'm now caught up. So I want to talk about my love for this story. My goal for this video is in two parts. One, I want to express my love for a story that has taken up a lot of my headspace and hopefully relate to other people who love this series. But two, I'm going to keep this video spoiler free so that if any of my book nerds decided to click on this video and want to know why I like this series, this weird, odd series so much, I'm gonna tell you. My experience with One Piece was I picked it up very casually. I knew little to nothing about it. I didn't know how long it was. I didn't know what the story was even about except pirates, which is always a draw-in for me. I didn't even know that it was meant to be wacky and goofy and silly, and when it started turning absurd, I didn't know how to process that. I also didn't know how big the fan base was or how enthusiastically they would encourage me to keep reading. But I started out very casually. I was reading the series very slowly with zero expectations and with zero spoilers or ideas of what was to come. My first saga with One Piece, which is 12 volumes long, I really enjoyed. I had my nitpicks, I had my qualms, but I had a great time with it. It felt like this lighthearted adventure with a boy that was so lovable and silly and strange. This boy whose body has turned into, become the ability to have the elasticity of rubber because of some sort of fruit that he ate by accident. That's a weird plot, Oda. And then he goes to different islands and on different adventures collecting his crew so that he will hopefully be able to find the One Piece and become the Pirate King. I love really good world building and I love really good characters. So in the beginning of the story, when we're just exploring these really unique places in the world and meeting these very odd characters that are so filled with heart and with strong backstories and surprisingly heavy moments, still coupled with humor and lightness and joy, I had a great time with that first saga. But eventually, I got to a point where I realized this is actually bigger than I thought. This world is more connected and there's a lot more intentionality being put towards this story than I realized. But realizing that I have a story on my hands that I'm genuinely really enjoying and have gotten very attached to, that actually has this much intentionality to it and that it's doing something big, got me really excited. But then I got to another point in the story where I realized for the first time how invested I had become. It snuck up on me. I was just having a great time with a great story, and then I realized I've become so invested that there is no way out. So what do I love about this story? One, the characters. These goofy, oddball designs, these silly, all-heart characters are so deep and tangible. I feel like I know these characters. I've been on a really long journey with them. I've spent a lot of time with them. I've read a lot of books, a lot of sagas following their story. They feel like tangible people. And there have been other books that I've read where I've come away saying, I know this person, and actually feeling a little bit off balance coming out of it because it feels like this story and these people are now a part of my life. There have been books like this. One Piece is one of those stories. I've journeyed with these characters, these goofy, wacky characters that contain so much heart, also contain so much depth, to the point that I now, 1,000 and insert number here at the time that this video is posted, chapters later, I'm still growing to know them in very consistent and deliberate ways. I'm learning new things about them that's only adding to their character and making me view things from back back in chapter 100 something, making me view those things differently because the layers, it doesn't feel like things are just being added on because the author needs more material. It feels like these are things that Oda has planned out on a grand scale. These characters are only getting deeper the more time I spend with them. Characters that I meet and I think that they're okay, fine, I guess you're a part of our crew, and now they're a part of my family. Characters that are these one-off characters that I think, okay, cool, we'll meet them, we'll beat them, we'll move on. They take up so much of my headspace once I get a backstory on them or once I get to know them a little bit better. Do you know that I still talk about a character, our second main antagonist that we face in this series? I still compare every antagonist we meet to him because he's so great. Our first antagonist that we meet in this, should we just talk about antagonists now? I guess we'll move on to antagonists. We start the series off facing a clown. Our first main antagonist is a circus. It's a clown and his circus. And it seems so silly and it seems so odd, and you think, what kind of series am I reading? And you're right, because throughout this series, there's so many strange things thrown at you that you either roll with or you die. This is a weird series, but somehow Oda manages to balance the strange absurdity with incredibly deep moments in a way that honestly shocks me. It's a style that I wouldn't think I would ever jive with. And yet here I am, amazed by it. But second of all, this series has some of the best antagonists I've ever read. I read some of these antagonists, I read their scenes, and every time I see their face, every time they say a word, every time they're on the page, I rage. There is a physical anger that stays inside my body, waiting to pounce whenever one of the One Piece antagonists comes onto the page. Because Oda doesn't write villains to be antagonists. He doesn't write villains to be the bad guy that we must defeat to get to our goal. Oda writes villains with the same level of nuance and care that he writes to his main characters. We get backstories, we get depth, we get layers, we get humanity from the most evil people in this world to the people that at first seem like mindless, soulless, evil people turn out to have motivations, turn out to have scars, turn out to have emotions that are just as deep. I still hate them so much, but I hate them on a new level because they are actually human. They're not just some mustache twirling bad guy that we must defeat. I get them. I understand them. I understand what made them the way they are and why they function the way they do. And I have now gotten to the point that almost every antagonist we face, which we have faced many, I expect to know them by the end and to understand them by the end, but to still want to see them go down. It blows me away. Speaking of which, let's just go straight into themes because, oh my goodness. Oda doesn't just tell a story, he has conversations with his readers. And each arc, each saga not only has its own story, self-contained story that contributes to the overarching story, which is how stories work. Not only does each saga have that, but each saga has its own themes that it's also discussing. And Oda is a master of themes. He will take themes like trauma, escaping abuse, racism, being oppressed and having your freedom stolen, and so many more deep, heavy, painful topics. And he doesn't just present them to us, the readers, but he explores them from every angle you could think think of, not letting a shred of nuance be lost on the topic. And oftentimes he'll show characters reacting in different ways, sometimes moralizing and sometimes not moralizing, because there's not just one straightforward answer sometimes. He takes topics that make me cry so hard, topics that make me really think, and he explores them on a level without sacrificing plot, without sacrificing characters, he has this incredible balance, that this thread that he's exploring throughout this fun, exciting, wacky, deep adventure. And he mixes it all together in a way that makes this story feel bigger than you initially think it is going into it, and creates incredible conversations within the community where we want to tear apart and dissect and discuss what's being said here. I've had some amazing conversations because of this series. Speaking of all that, let's talk about emotions. Oda handles emotions so well. There are characters that I barely know or barely care about, and in such a short period of time, suddenly I'm sobbing over their story. It's become kind of a joke in my house that Corey will walk into the room and see me just pouring down tears, and he'll just casually say, "Oh, so you're reading One Piece again?" Characters that seem so simple suddenly have so much depth, so much that they've gone through, so much that they're fighting for. And a scene will have me cracking up and then suddenly bursting out in tears and then laughing through my tears again. This series invokes so much rage and joy and pain in me, and I never went into it expecting anything like that from it, but it balances these extreme emotions so well. And finally, I don't know why I just said finally, I have more to talk about in this video. We need to talk about humor, because I've already touched on it, but this is another thing that is balanced so well. You'll have this incredible, impactful, intense character moment, and then just a quick comedy relief that just kind of interrupts it and almost staggers you a little bit, and then on with the emotions, which sounds like it doesn't work. Somehow it does. The humor in this story is not always perfect. I will say, actually, one of Oda's biggest deficits is sometimes his humor, because sometimes his humor really doesn't land for me. Sometimes he makes light of topics that, frankly, I just don't understand in a series filled with so much thought and care, and talk about freedom and honor and respect, and then he'll throw in like a peeping at women while they're changing joke and just like super make light of it, and I just don't understand Oda. Sometimes the humor, greatest deficit, but most of the time, 99% of the time, or 98% of the time, the humor is so perfect for this series. Because it is still an adventure, despite the emotions, despite the pain, despite the incredible depth, deep look into really painful and difficult and nuanced topics. Despite all those things, at its core, it is an adventure to fulfill your dreams and to fight for freedoms. Some of the gags in this story and some of the dialogue in this story has me cracking up as I read the pages, and the humor in this series, while not always on point, is 98% of the time on point. So perfect. And then on top of all these things, the way he balances all these different emotions so well, on top of all that, the world is so interconnected. The plot is so interconnected. Even the characters and the little moments they have. You'll have a character that's introduced here but isn't explored until way over here. You'll have a character that you've been traveling with and knowing and really feeling like you understand this character for 1,000 chapters or 900 chapters and then suddenly get a second backstory on them, and all of a sudden everything you knew about them is still consistent but recontextualized, and all of a sudden you know this character on a level that you didn't even know you were missing. The way tiny little details interconnect into the story and become so significant to the story eons later is honestly incredible. I've read other series that do this. I've read other series that have tiny little details that become grandly significant, and I'm a sucker for it. I always love it. I'm never not satisfied when it's done well, and oh my goodness. And what amazes me about this series, talking about balance even more, is that Oda manages to make this series one where these tiny intentional details that he's planned out years and years in advance, something that's planted here but isn't actually made, isn't explained until all this time later, but all the context we got in between is what makes this moment so significant and makes us recall that other moment. His ability to do this makes it so that fans who want to go crazy and want to pick apart every detail and take these little puzzle pieces and try to make sense of them, want to theorize, want to predict what's going to happen next, they can, and they have so much fodder. They have so much theory fodder. But also your casual fan that just wants to enjoy a series that will make them laugh and cry and have a great time, your casual fan isn't disappointed either. There's so much happening in the story. There's so much constantly going on in the story that just a casual reading of it is also incredibly satisfying, and these little details that will get so much payoff later on don't bog the story down. Now, Oda is a long storyteller. He does not condense. He is not concise. He likes to take his time with his story. The series is over 1,000 chapters long, and it's not gonna be done for a while. And while that could be an intimidation factor going into it, which is fair, the thing is that, at least for me, I have fallen so in love with this series. The characters have become so tangible to me, and the things that we go through with them take up so much of my headspace and really stick with me. They really move me and become a part of my life, that I don't mind that Oda doesn't condense, even though, you know, I have series, I'm a hypocrite. There are series that I read and I say, this could have been condensed. This was so wordy. This was so verbose. Calm down, sir. I don't care about your world as much as you do. And then there are other series that I say, oh, it could absolutely be trimmed down, but I enjoyed reading it so much, I don't care. I'd like more, please. And it's just a matter of, you know, you want the stories that you enjoy to be tightly paced, and the stories that you love, you want to live there. And One Piece is one of those stories that I want to live there. And Oda not being a tight pacer, Oda not being worried about the time he's gonna spend to make something pay off, it's actually become one of my favorite things about the story, because I really don't want it to end. I want to visit more islands. I want to liberate more people. I want to explore more characters. I don't want to stop. I want to know what the One Piece is. I want to see Luffy become Pirate King. I want all the many, many questions that I have to someday be answered. But not today. Not today. As a reader, there are stories that you enjoy, and there are stories that kind of become a part of you. Stories that you don't really stop thinking about, that the characters feel like they are a part of your family, the journey. You've been on it with them. The world, you've lived there. It's become a part of your story. It becomes something that you lean on in hard times or rely on for answers when you don't know what to do. Stories have the ability to impact people and to shape people. And different stories will do that for different people. One Piece has become one of mine. And a big part of it too is the community that has banded around me and accepted me into the family. I've made great friends through this series. I've had amazing conversations with strangers by wearing the merch. I feel connected to the story, and I feel connected to the people who also feel connected to the story, and it's just been a great experience for me. I just got caught up with the series recently. I've already started my reread of it because, quite frankly, being a week-to-week reader, I don't really want to stop being fully immersed in this series. And it's been really, really great going back and seeing my characters in a totally different point in their lives, but knowing where they'll wind up, at least at this point, and being able to read their story again with a different lens. So if you want to know why One Piece has taken up so much of my time and so much of my attention, and why I spend so much time talking about it, it's because there's a lot to talk about in this series, and I have fallen in love with it. And these are my reasons why. If you do love this series, I'd love to hear from you. Please say in the comments why you love this series, why it's moved you, why it matters to you. And if you haven't read the series, feel free to tell us in the comments if you plan on starting it. It's really blown me away, and I don't get tired of talking about it, ever. But I will stop here. So, I post videos every Tuesday and Friday, and I have a second channel that I've started where I post vlogs. Those videos go up on Thursdays. It'll be linked in this description if you're interested. Be sure to chat with me more in the comments. I'll see you again soon. Bye.